It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
You know, the way I see this, if this doesn't change, I see what has happened to the American people is we have accepted the notion that we should be treated like cattle. Make us safe, make us secure, put us in the barbed wire, feed us, fatten us up, and then they'll eat us. And we're a bunch of cattle, and we have to wake up and say, we've had it. I think this whole idea of an opt-out day is just great. We ought to opt out and make the point, get somebody to watch it, take a camera. It's time for the American people to stand up, shrug off the shackles of our government at TSA at the airport.
Wow. So maybe it might be economics. You know, we talked to local officials, Phoenix Police and the City of Phoenix and Sky Harbor and on and on and on. And it's come down to they are concerned about, you know, keeping their job or this or that. But what they really are not really thinking about is the economics of it. It's very libertarian to do boycotts. It's very libertarian to vote with your wallet. Call it wallet voting. You know, so this is, let's talk to economist Don Boudreaux and kind of, what kind of impact can we expect from that? Is that a viable protest that's doing that kind of thing?
I wish I could say it is. I mean, you're right. Boycotts are certainly they're a long and celebrated economic protest tool that often do have effects. I don't see one day as changing much because the TSA is a big bureaucratic institution. It answers to politicians mostly, not really to consumers in the way that McDonald's or Nike answer to consumers. And so I'm actually not optimistic about the consequences. And I will say I think it's a difficult issue. I love Ron Paul. I really do. It's a difficult issue. Ron Paul, of course, knows the root of this. The root of all this problem is America has its military involved in foreign affairs in ways that it should not. I'm convinced that if America followed Switzerland's policy, we just minded our own business, then there'd be a lot less fewer people in the world willing to kill themselves to kill Americans. And that would reduce these problems. It wouldn't make them go away, perhaps, but it would reduce the problem a lot. Given that, though, we're constantly out there disturbing this hornet's nest. We have all these hornets around trying to kill Americans, and Americans rightly, and thank goodness for it, don't trust the government, don't like these government officials scanning our bodies, touching our junk, which is the new term of art. And the whole idea of this. People say, well, yes, but the idea is to save lives, and let's grant that for a moment. But here's an economic point for you. Economists understand that when costs rise, people change their behavior. The extremely long lines and the increasing indignity of going through airport screening in order to fly on planes, that's going to cause some people to substitute into alternative modes of transportation. Well, we all know that an alternative mode of transportation is at least for medium-sized and short trips, is driving. We all know that driving is more costly than flying. And so it's not unreasonable to me at all that as airport screening becomes more costly in a variety of different ways, time, indignities, that some people are going to switch over to driving for short trips, and then that might actually increase the total death rate because highways are more dangerous places than is the sky, is the air. But back to your original question, Mr. Hancock. I wish it would, but the problem is that the government's it doesn't get its payment by responding to consumers, and so therefore it's often deaf and insensitive to what its customers really want.
I think they are. But I don't think the airlines are. I don't think the amusement parks are. I don't think the hotels and the tourism states like Arizona. The pressure comes from a lot of places, and it comes in via, even congressmen. They get a lot of pressure from some, so they got to, pressures back and forth and this, and it finally gets to the point to where, the people just, like you're saying, I remember the special, it was a John Stossel thing, Are We Scaring Ourselves to Death? And I remember the point that he made. Yeah, that was a great episode. And I remember the point that was years ago. And he made the point, can you be guilty of statistical murder? When you start requiring all these different regulations on airlines that increase the price, and all of a sudden X amount of people will prefer to drive from San Francisco to L.A. as opposed to fly, all of a sudden you're increasing the death rate, by, because you're right, it is safer and a lot of times cheaper to fly. But when you start corralling people over towards the highways and you have more death, are you guilty of statistical murder? Well, they don't think that way.
I think that they don't, but they should, because that's exactly what happens. My colleague, whom you may know of or know, Walter Williams, great economist, great American. Walter, he just refuses to fly commercially anymore. Now he's getting up in age, so he just chooses not to travel so much. But when he travels between, say, Philadelphia and Washington, or Philadelphia, New York, he always drives. He doesn't take the shuttle any longer, precisely because his libertarian instincts are so deep. He just cannot stand to be herded and treated like cattle by these TSA agents, so he just will not fly any longer.
I remember one of our first summits was it the first one or the second one? It was Aaron Zellman from JPFO, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. And he was scheduled to be a speaker, and then they started doing all of this frisking stuff, and then he said, "That's it, I'm done, I'm not coming, I can't, I won't fly anymore, we're done." And there are people that are even, if you're wealthy enough, heck, I'll just buy my own plane. In fact, I know some people that have. But the thing is now, just in the last year, you have to get TSA approval and have the names of everybody that's getting on your plane. Now you got to get permission to get on your own plane. So this is really, it seems like it's, they just cranked up the boiling point, and chucking frogs in. Yep. And I'm going, is it time? Do you see this is this one of those things throughout history? There's before markers and there's after markers. I mean, is this one of those markers?
It's hard to say whether it will be. I think even more than this. I mean, to change the subject a little bit, but I think the Obamacare and the stimulus and the auto bailout will be one of those things. I'll tell you. Do I have time to tell you a quick story about?
Yeah, you got about 90 seconds. Go, man.
Well, you said the first Freedom Summit I did was in just after 9/11, and here, talk about the frog. I remember very clearly being at the Phoenix airport that Sunday morning to fly back east, and that was the first time I was ever asked to remove my shoes. And I remember thinking, Americans, we just won't stand for this. This is absurd. And now, and I'm one of them too. I go up there, I take my shoes off without any thought. And so it is scary and incredible how quickly we become accustomed to being treated like cattle. And at some point, it's got to stop. And I would like to see it stop now.
And we're getting closer to it. Don Boudreau at the Freedom Summit, freedomsummit.com. Thanks for coming on, Don. We'll be right back.